Every legal system on Earth agrees on one thing. Murder is wrong. Theft is wrong. Violence is wrong. You'd assume those were the first things humans ever decided to punish. You'd be completely wrong. The first crime that ancient human groups systematically punished, the behavior that triggered coordinated social consequences before we had writing, agriculture, or permanent shelter, wasn't violence. It wasn't stealing. It wasn't even lying. It was getting too powerful. Think about that for a second. Before humanity figured out the wheel, before we had cities or kings or courts, we had already invented a system to punish people who had too much, and we enforced it brutally, collectively, and with chilling precision. The ancient alpha male wasn't the first ruler. He was the first criminal. So the real question isn't what the first crime was. It's why we still feel its punishment system firing in us today. In situations that have nothing to do with survival, here's where the evidence starts. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm spent decades studying hunter-gatherer societies around the world. After analyzing over 50 groups across 5 continents, from the Kungsan of the Kalahari to Arctic foragers, he found a pattern so consistent it looked like a law of nature. In his landmark 1999 book Hierarchy in the Forest, and later expanded in peer-reviewed work published in Current Anthropology, Boehm described what he called reverse dominance hierarchies. Here's how it worked. In a standard dominance hierarchy, and the kind you see in chimps, gorillas, wolves, a few individuals dominate the many. The alpha eats first, mates first, everyone else defers. But in early human bands, the many acted together to neutralize any individual who started behaving like an alpha. The group became the alpha. Boehm documented a predictable escalation of punishments. First came ridicule, targeted public mockery designed to humiliate the transgressor. If that didn't work, next came shunning. The band began acting as if the person didn't exist. Then ostracism. Then banishment. And in documented cases, when all else failed, execution. Not for murder. Not for theft. For arrogance. Boehm's own words, arrogance amounts to a crime. But that's not even the strangest part. In 2015, UCL anthropologist Mark Dyble and colleagues published a study in Science examining the social structure of Gächter foragers in the Philippines and Bayaka foragers in the Congo. What they found was striking. Egalitarian hunter-gatherer bands had far more unrelated individuals living together, averaging around 16.7% unrelated dyads, compared to just 4.2% in non-egalitarian farming communities. This wasn't accidental. Dyble's team found that sex equality in decision-making directly produced wider, less clannish social networks. And those wider networks, his team argued in the paper, created the conditions for hyper-cooperation and cumulative culture, the very traits that made humans dominant on Earth. In other words, punishing dominance seeking wasn't just about fairness. It was the mechanism that built civilization. And then there's this. In 2002, Swiss economist Ernst Fehr and colleague Simon Gächter published a paper in Nature that confirmed something remarkable. Humans will punish defectors even when doing so costs them personally and produces no material gain whatsoever. They called it altruistic punishment. In a series of controlled economic games, participants sacrificed their own resources just to sanction someone who had broken the rules of fair sharing, even strangers they'd never interact with again. Fehr and Gächter concluded that altruistic punishment wasn't just a behavior. It was a decisive force in the evolution of human cooperation. Remove the possibility of punishment, their data showed, and cooperation collapsed. Introduce it. And cooperation flourished. The threat of being punished for taking too much was the invisible architecture holding human society together. The person who put this all together most precisely is Richard Wrangham, professor of biological anthropology at Harvard, primatologist, and author of The Goodness Paradox, 2019. Wrangham had spent years studying chimpanzee aggression, and what he noticed in the fossil record of early Homo sapiens disturbed him. Around 300,000 years ago, the human skeleton began changing in a very specific direction. Faces became smaller, brow ridges reduced. The traits that in domesticated animals correlate with lower reactive aggression, the kind that erupts in an instant, violently, without planning, began appearing in the human lineage, but not in Neanderthals, not in Denisovans, only in us. Wrangham proposed what he called the self-domestication hypothesis, published in Frontiers in Psychology in 2019. The argument, once language became complex enough for beta males to plan together, they began systematically executing the most aggressive, domineering individuals in the group. He called these events targeted conspiratorial killings, not fights, not duels, coordinated assassinations of bullies. Over roughly 12,000 generations, from 300,000 years ago to the emergence of agriculture, selection pressure moved steadily against reactive aggression. The genes for docility spread. The genes for impulsive alpha dominance were quite literally killed off. We didn't evolve morality by becoming gentle. We evolved it by becoming efficient executioners of people who wouldn't share power. Now, to be fair, the mainstream evolutionary explanation for all of this is genuinely compelling, and it deserves a real hearing. Evolutionary game theory calls it the leveling coalition strategy, and the math is clean. In small bands of 20 to 50 individuals, anyone who monopolizes resources becomes a direct threat to everyone else's reproductive success. The rational individual response, given that everyone shares this vulnerability, is to form alliances and neutralize that threat. Groups that reliably produced these leveling coalitions outcompeted groups that didn't. The behavior got genetically reinforced over tens of thousands of generations. Not because humans were wise, but because they were self-interested. And honestly, this explanation is good. It doesn't require you to assume altruism at the biological level. It doesn't require advanced theory of mind or complex culture. It just requires individuals to recognize, the bully threatens me, and together we can stop him. The egalitarianism that resulted isn't a value our ancestors chose. It's an equilibrium they landed in because the alternative was worse. You could walk away satisfied. The first crime was punished because punishing it was evolutionarily optimal. Neat. Solved. But still, the mainstream explanation accounts for why egalitarian punishment was adaptive. What it doesn't fully explain is what happened to that system after the environment it evolved for disappeared. In 2004, neuroscientist Dominique de Quervain and colleagues at the University of Zurich did something no one had tried before. They put people inside pet brain scanners while they played economic trust games, and they scanned their brains specifically during the moment of punishment decision. Their study, published in Science, found that effective punishment that actually hurt the target, activated the dorsal striatum, specifically the caudate nucleus, a region implicated in reward processing. The same circuitry that activates for food, for sex, for any outcome the brain anticipates with pleasure. People showing higher caudate activation at the moment of deciding to punish also spent more of their own money on punishment when it cost them something. The more their reward system lit up at the prospect of punishing someone, the more they were willing to sacrifice to do it. They weren't grimly tolerating the cost of justice. They were enjoying it. And here's the part that should make you pause. De Quervain's subjects weren't punishing people who had actually wronged them directly. They were punishing in economic games designed to isolate the act from personal gain. There was no material upside. The reward was purely the punishment itself. The same year, Joseph Henrich at Harvard led a landmark cross-cultural study, published in Behavioral and Brain Sciences in 2005, that ran economic games including punishment scenarios across 15 small-scale societies: hunter-gatherers in Tanzania, farmers in Ecuador, herders in Mongolia. The canonical economic model of self-interest failed in every single one of them. People everywhere were willing to punish, even at personal cost, those who violated norms of equal sharing. Not just in Western lab settings. Everywhere humans were studied. So the system isn't just ancient, it appears to be universal, and it appears to activate in the brain as reward. This is the part the standard leveling coalition model doesn't fully account for. The evolutionary story explains why the behavior existed. It doesn't explain why the neural reward for punishing persists in contexts where there is no dominance to reverse, no coalition to maintain, no survival advantage whatsoever. You don't live in a band of 50 people. The coworker who got the promotion you deserved poses zero threat to your reproductive success. The billionaire whose face shows up on your phone tonight has never once interacted with you. And yet the anger, the hot, righteous, immediate conviction that someone needs to be taken down, is there. It feels like justice. It feels like something must be done. That is a 300,000-year-old brain circuit firing. A circuit built in a world where the powerful man in your camp of 40 people might actually take your food and your future. A circuit that was so effective, so survival critical, that it got wired directly into your reward system. The brain cannot read context. It cannot verify whether the person triggering the circuit actually has power over you. It cannot distinguish between a genuine bully in your community and a symbol of excess you saw on a screen. The sensation is identical. Here's what that leaves you with. Every political movement in recorded history that has successfully mobilized mass outrage has been running on this circuit, not manufacturing it, activating it. The emotion isn't fake. It evolved to solve a real problem. Egalitarianism, remember, wasn't just a preference. Dyble's research showed it produced the social conditions for everything we call civilization. But a reward system doesn't come with an instruction manual. It doesn't tell you when it's appropriate. It doesn't warn you when the target of your punishment instinct is a symbol rather than a source. Boehm's own data shows that every known hunter-gatherer society carefully deliberated before escalating punishment. Ridicule, shunning, ostracism. They built in friction. They required consensus. They knew, without ever having evolutionary biology to explain it, that the punishment impulse was powerful and needed managing. So here's the question that stays with you tomorrow and the day after that, the next time you feel that particular flavor of justice. The deep, satisfying certainty that someone needs to be brought down, exposed, humiliated, taken apart. How would you know if you're protecting the tribe? Or just running a circuit that's 300,000 years old, firing at a ghost?